Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, How to Harvest Maximum Value from Your Business by Jerry Baltus, author of the book Final Act of Ownership, and he is also a business coach for Baltus Group Advocoach. My name is Ryan Kauth, and I will be your host today. I direct the Wisconsin Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, at UW Green Bay. The Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is part of a statewide network and national America's SBDC network, supporting entrepreneurs and business owners through no-cost confidential business advising and targeted educational programs. Regional SBDC experts facilitate improvement and growth for small and emerging mid-sized companies and help launch successful new enterprises. The no-cost business planning and low-cost workforce leadership development training at the Wisconsin SBDC at UW Green Bay is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration, or SBA. Our website is uwgb.edu/SBDC. Today we continue our 2015 monthly no-cost 30-minute topical webinar series designed for the success of small business owners and their executive team members. At the conclusion of this webinar, we will share the upcoming webinar topics, and we encourage you to consider registering for those. We thank Mickey Noon and Chad Van Andel from First Business Bank for their partnership in promoting these monthly webinars and for their dedication to small business success. We also thank Michael Wentworth and his company TMR Associates, the B2B appointment setting company providing qualified leads and market insights, for their partnership in developing these webinars. After the webinar, you will be emailed a link to a recording of this webinar. And during the webinar, you are invited to ask questions at any time. Please use the menu along the right side of your screen indicated here in the red circle. Type your question and hit enter, and as soon as I see it, I will make note of it for the presenter to address toward the end of our webinar. And now I'd like to turn it over to our expert presenter this month, business coach and author Jerry Baltus. Jerry?
Thank you, Ryan. I very much appreciate that introduction, and happy to be here to talk about this topic today. Ryan, are you seeing the red and black final act of ownership slides?
I'm not seeing it quite yet, so give it a beat here.
All right.
Sometimes it takes a second to transition here.
All right.
Let me try one more time. All right, we're back to showing my screen. Let's try to show Jerry's now. Yeah, I am not, for some reason it's not detecting your screen. So here's what we'll do, Jerry.
Right. I just,
there we go.
There's a quick signal that popped up. Yeah, I just checked. I didn't see the box originally.
Okay,
there we are.
Perfect.
Cool.
You're set.
Well, good. Thanks, Ryan. I appreciate that. And thanks, everybody, for your patience while we deal with that little technical issue. But that's sometimes the way these things go, which is great. So, look, today what I'd really like to do is talk a little bit about an issue that has become kind of near and dear to my heart, the issue of really preparing to sell your small business, and what does that entail. And it's something that I have been interested in for some time. I wrote a book on this topic a couple of years ago called Final Act of Ownership to fill a little bit of a void of a resource for small business owners to understand a little bit more about what to anticipate with this issue. So I'm going to dive right in to the topic. One of the things that I like to emphasize right from the beginning is that U.S. small businesses are out there in really big numbers. What a lot of people don't realize, however, is that small businesses make up such a very large majority of the overall business population. 97.7% of businesses employ less than 100 employees, meaning that only 2.3% of all businesses employ more than 100 employees. And of course, we hear about these large businesses all the time. They're huge drivers of the economy, and yet they really make up a relatively small proportion of the total. If we get even tinier with businesses, less than 10 employees, those employers make up over 73% of all businesses in terms of the pure numbers. And those numbers are only employer businesses. If we add in solopreneurs, we have nearly 28 million businesses in our country that have less than 10 employees. So why is this important when we think about, the topic of selling our business? Because entrepreneurship is very important, and sometimes when we think about selling, we think, well, who's out there, who's going to be interested in buying my business? Well, there's a lot of people that are interested in entrepreneurship and in getting into business and looking at opportunities to do so in a small business sector, which is, for most people, really what they can afford to do. So it's a topic that many business owners, as they reach retirement age, or if they simply are looking to sort of disband their business, sell their business, and try to open something else, it's an issue that is something that we don't do very often. Brokering of small businesses is somewhat rare. Not that it's not done, it certainly is, but many business brokers work with businesses that have valuations starting about $1 million to $1.5 million and higher. And so if we have a business that's worth $750,000 or $450,000, it's somewhat unlikely that we'll be able to find a broker that's interested in working with that opportunity. Some small business owners turn to real estate agents to help sell their business if there is property involved, but that sometimes causes a bit of a disconnect in terms of trying to figure out what is the business really worth and how does it fit together with the property. So as I said before, the resources available to help value and market and negotiate a business sale transaction are somewhat limited. And for those of us trying to do this on our own, it's not something we've ever done before. Selling a business is not normal. It's typically only done once in our business career, and so we don't often know how to do that, where to begin, and yet it's one of the most important financial transactions that we will make. So therefore, I did write this book called Final Act of Ownership. It's a bit of a resource, a bit of a process for sort of navigating these waters and trying to get this aspect of our business life done, this final act, as I've called it. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the concepts that I discussed in the book. And one of the things that readers have told me that they like about the book is that it starts with a chapter on emotions. And I think they like that because there are a few other resources out there that talk about all of the technical aspects of selling a business, but we don't often think about what's going through our heads as sellers of our business. And so we talk a little bit about the fears and desires that we experience. The fears are very important to acknowledge early on. The fact that we've never sold a business before. We don't really know how to go about it. We're not sure what the business is worth. Sometimes we think the business is worth a lot more than it is. That can be a dangerous circumstance. And of course, thinking that the business is worth less than it really is might actually be a happy occasion when we learn that the true value. But it's still a scary situation. How do we determine that? Many business owners also fear that the business has no value whatsoever, that what they've spent their life creating is worthless, no one else is going to want it. That can be a fear that can stop someone from going ahead with searching for a buyer. Some people think that no one but they are able to run this business, that they have the technical skills and ability, and that they just haven't run into anyone who is able to get that done. And lastly, A common fear is that the experts, people like myself and bankers and accountants and brokers, may not be trustworthy to help them to do this. Maybe they cost too much, and so it holds them back from going forward. On the other hand, you know, we all come to a point in our life where we'd like to slow down, enjoy life, eliminate some of the stress that the business has had on our life. We generally have an interest of carrying on the culture of the business, that the new owner will continue to do what we've built, and that there will be a legacy to that for future generations, or one or two generations at least. And many times our desire is very strong to take care of employees and sometimes customers, that we really feel that if we sell the business, we want to make sure that our employees who have served us well are going to be well taken care of in the sale. And so all of these emotions really need to be addressed and discussed, and either navigated around or put aside, or dealt with directly in such a way that the owner feels comfortable moving forward. One of the things that I do, and others like me, is to be very frank and clear about these emotions, provide some education and guidance, provide a system or approach, which is what the book really intends to start for business sellers. And we really try to help the business owner realize the maximum value possible out of the business asset that they've built. So once we've dealt with the emotions, we really like to start to think about what is the kind of person or company, what's the kind of entity that might be interested in our business. And so we really want to spend a little bit of time talking about the types of buyers that might be the most likely and the most advantageous in a sale. Knowing the type of buyer helps us to sort of manage the expectations of the seller, so that they somewhat know what they're getting into, or what's possible. This is often important to take care of that desire of maintaining a legacy, carrying on a culture, taking care of employees, and those types of things, because different types of buyers may look at those issues in different ways. I think it's very important to understand the type of buyer, because the kind of buyer that we have is going to make a difference in terms of why they're motivated to buy this business. And of course, we want to target buyers who are in the best position to offer as much value, as much price as possible in the end. So let me just touch on three very typical buyers. These three general categories seem to cover most of the landscape when we look at the types of buyers that are likely for our business. With small businesses, oftentimes the business is owned by someone who is still primarily acting in terms of a technician in their business. If you would imagine, for example, a HVAC dealer, someone who installs and services heating and air conditioning systems, for example, they may be someone who is doing some of that installation and service work themselves. They may have one or two employees, but they still are doing the bulk of the work of the business that generates revenue. Once you take that person out of the business doesn't have a whole lot of value, as we'll discuss a little later. And so we often, in a business like that, really have to look for someone just like the present owner, someone who's an expert in the technical work of the business and is able to carry on what the current owner has done. It's very common for a lot of small businesses that's exactly the type of buyer that we need. But they may be somewhat less financially strong than compared to some of the other buyers. It can result in a little lower purchase price at times, and it does give us some challenges in terms of financing that we also have to deal with. But on the other hand, there is somewhat of an ease of finding buyers in this category, because they may be working for someone else with the desire to be an entrepreneur and to get into business for themselves, and they simply may be our own employees in some cases as well, people who we are happy to turn the business over to because they've served us well over a period of time, have learned the technical aspects of the business, and are definitely ready to take it over. So technical buyers are very important to understand. The second type of buyer is a financial buyer, someone who sees the business as an investment that will produce a favorable return. So financial buyers are really more interested in the numbers. They want to understand the track record, the market that the business is in, the growth possibility. Certainly they want to understand that there's a management team in place or one that could be put in place that would be able to carry on and grow the business beyond where it is. The good news about financial buyers is that they generally are very capable of funding the acquisition because that is what they do in many cases. But they may be the least concerned with culture and legacy and be primarily focused on the financial return, which might be a concern for certain small business sellers. Lastly, the really good type of buyer is a strategic buyer. If we can find someone who has the potential of enhancing their own business because of the purchase of our business, there's more synergy in the return, if you will, on the combination of the two businesses. A strategic buyer may place a very high value on the culture and on the team that is being sold because they want to have a fit with perhaps their own business. They may be looking for product additions, a geography expansion. They may actually, what's becoming more popular or more common, I should say, is that strategic buyers are often interested in the people that we have in our business. One of the things that we see in eastern Wisconsin these days is that good employees are harder to find. Our unemployment rates are very low. Employers are struggling with recruitment. And so sometimes acquisitions take place because of the people and the skills that we have in our labor force. And that can be an important factor for a strategic buyer. Strategic buyers are also usually easily able to finance the acquisition. Most cases, a strategic buyer will be a larger business than the seller. Although that's not 100% true all the time. Sometimes small businesses buy larger ones. But in many cases, the strategic buyer will have the funding to pull off the transaction. And because there's synergy in the combination of two businesses, strategic buyers generally have the best likelihood of offering a higher price for the business. So we have to think about that when we are trying to identify target buyers, and we'll touch on that in a bit as well. So as we start to look at what do we need to do to prepare to sell our business, really one of the very first steps is evaluation. And I don't think I'm telling you anything that you probably don't know. It's really good to start to have a benchmark for where are we at with this sales price. In general, at least from a ranged point of view, what is the relative valuation? One of the things that's also important throughout all of this is to look at the seller from the personal standpoint and say, you know, what kind of funding do you need from this business asset that you've built to carry on with the rest of your life? So knowing the valuation gives us a chance to step back and say, okay, so the business is worth X amount of money. Is that going to give you the kind of money, the kind of funds that you need to carry on with your retirement, retirement portion of your life? So that's a personal thing that I think is very important before we go headlong into selling the business. Let's make sure that we have something that's going to fit the owner's needs. The other thing about evaluation that's very important is it often points out areas where we can improve. I like to think of selling a business in some ways like selling a house. Before you sell your house, you might paint the bedroom, you might pull some shrubs and plant some new shrubbery in the front lawn. You might put a coat of paint on the outside or put a new roof on. So you're going to dress up the business a little, the house a little bit in order to improve the value. The same can be said of our business, that sometimes as we do the valuation, we can find small areas where we can make some relatively quick improvements that enhance the value, and those can be implemented prior to the sale. The valuation is also important because as we look at why we have set a price where it is, that we have a way of educating the seller about that price level. Sometimes sellers are just as confused about where the value should be as the buyer, and so having a good rationale in mind for where we have set that valuation is really important. But most of all, it is important to remember that evaluation is just a number. The ultimate price will be affected by some other factors that we will discuss. And of course, beauty is always in the eyes of the beholder, and the final price is always going to be somewhat negotiated. And so valuation in the beginning is really just a starting point. So I do want to touch on some of the other factors that do come into play beyond the numerical calculation of value. There are some other important things to think about. I'm just going to quickly run through these. There's a great book by John Warlow called Built to Sell, where some of these factors are discussed, and very interesting story in that book about how a business owner went through the decision to sell and how that turned out for him. But John Warlow, out of that book, grew 8 sellability factors that I think have been proven to really be true in terms of adding or deducting from the numerical value of a business. So the first is hub and spoke. The hub of the business is the owner, if that owner is a technician, and all of the rest of the business revolves around that person as the hub. If you take away the owner, you take out the hub, and basically the wheels fall off of the business. So it's very important that we look at how important is it that the owner how important is the owner to the operation and the continued operation of that business. The more that the owner can step away and the business can operate without them, the higher the value of the business. Customer satisfaction is also very important. Of course, all of us generally tend to think that our customers are very satisfied, but the key here is being able to prove it. If we have proof of customer satisfaction, buyers like that. They like to know that our customers really do like us, and that we have that proof through things like Net Promoter Score, or testimonials, or recurring revenue, which we'll talk about. The third is monopoly control. How differentiated are we? How unique are we in the marketplace? Do we have a bit of differentiation that draws people to us more so than our competitors? Recurring revenue, I touched on. It's not only a measure of customer satisfaction, but think of yourself as a buyer. If you were to buy a business where you didn't have to sell very hard because you had a certain amount of recurring revenue that was there, that business would be more valuable to you than one in which you had to sell over and over again for every transaction. Valuation teeter-totter has to do with the cash flow of the business, and it really has to do with the fact that if you as the buyer need to put more cash into the business when you open the doors on day one, you're not going to want to pay as much for that business, so you're going to lower the price because you have more cash to put into the business. On the other hand, if there's plenty of working capital and the business generates that working capital very quickly for you, you're going to be willing to pay a little bit more for that business. Switzerland structure is a common danger that we see with a lot of businesses. What it refers to is the neutrality of mostly the customer base, and what I mean by that is that if you do not have a customer or a small set of customers who represent a significant amount of your sales, your business is very neutral. You have a very diverse customer base, and the loss of any one or two of your top customers is not going to destroy the business. So you're at neutral. You're not going to be harmed by that. On the other hand, if you have a significant customer that represents maybe 25% or more of your business, or if you have a specific supplier who you rely on, or even if you have a very key employee who's critical to the business, your value in the eyes of the buyer is going to be lower. Growth potential is very simple, just exactly what it says. What is the potential for this business to scale? Can a buyer come in and with some good strategic planning, can they put some steps in place to grow further? Is your industry growing? That's an important factor as well. And then lastly, financial performance is really what drives the valuation. But one thing I like to note about financial performance is not just that you can have a very nice value for your business, but do your financial records support that value? Do you have good record keeping, sound bookkeeping practices? As your accountant reviewed the numbers, can someone prove that your value is what you say it is? So all very important factors. So as we prepare for sale, there are a number of things that come into play. Mental preparation and attitude, that again goes back to the emotions that we really want to deal with. But in preparing for sale, we like to look at the valuation again and some other elements that I'm just going to touch on subsequent slides. All of these areas, by the way, which a business coach or other advisor experienced in acquisitions and business sales can help with. Strategic plan is one of those things that are important in preparing. And many times I've had clients say to me, Jerry, I don't really plan to be here. I don't need to do a strategic plan. I'm not going to be around to carry it out. And that's great. But my point is that I think a buyer wants to know that the seller has an outlook for the future direction and strategy of the business that they might be able to tap into and carry out. No one knows the business and its potential better than its current owner, and so a seller would be very interested in seeing what's your strategic plan. If you were going to stay on and own this business, what would you do with it? They'd be very they'd be very interested in knowing that, and it would create a bit more value for them. I hinted at this before, but the idea of improving the business prior to sale is very important. And so a business evaluation, in other words, looking at what's going on in the business, where could we improve the performance, where could we improve the value? It might be based on a number of areas, but this is one of those critical things that really causes all experts in business sales and brokers and others to say that you really need to start 2 to 6 years ahead of time in preparing for your business sale. Now, unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that. They wake up one day and decide, you know what, it's time to sell. I've had it. I've got to take the wife to France, and I'm not going to be able to continue to run this business. So we often end up skipping this step. But if we can spend a little time working on the evaluation, working on an improvement of certain aspects of our business, particularly some of those sellability factors that I mentioned, it can add hundreds of thousands of dollars to the final price and make a big difference in the amount of money that you pocket at the end of your ownership term. One of the things that I really like to do is to help my clients write a prospectus for their business. It's really an executive overview that allows us to give the prospects some information to pique their interest in the business. And I really think it sets some sellers apart when they have that prospectus to present their business in a professional way and a consistent way to all buyers. And then the other step that we want to really talk about is, what about those potential buyers? How do we find them? I mentioned earlier that we might want to look at technical buyers in some cases, financial buyers, or strategic buyers. But these 7 points that you see on the screen here really help us to think about, who are these people? So if we think about who our direct competitors are, or who do we know that might be able to sell more of their products or services by adding our products and services to their offering? Who would gain competitive advantage with our business? So if we really think through these questions, we can often develop a very definite list of target buyers that we or someone could reach out to just ask about their interest in our business. And as a business coach, one of the things that I like to do is to go over that issue or that process with the seller. How do they go about approaching potential buyers? How do you have the conversation with, say, your competitor, for example, who you maybe haven't gotten along with very well over the years, but may find that they are the perfect person to take over your business. So we go through those issues and questions and make sure that people have some kind of an idea of how to get that done in a good way. The selling process consists of getting a letter of intent, at some point, helping the buyer and the seller work through the due diligence, which is simply the information gathering to assure the buyer that what they think they're buying is basically what it is, and to help them through all the details of a purchase agreement, which defines what's included, and who and the types of legal protections that both the buyer and the seller are looking for. So all of these things really add up to the fact that it's important to start early. Don't wait till the last minute if you can help it. Use advisors, use a business coach. Talk to your accountant. Get a good attorney who's experienced in business sales and acquisitions. Talk to your financial advisor to make sure that the proceeds of the business are going to be adequate for your future needs. Involve a business broker where possible. If you have the opportunity to work with one, they're really helpful when it comes to marketing and negotiating the sale. And of course, your banker, if you have debt to retire, and if you're looking for financing options for either the buyer or for yourself for future endeavors, it's really important to get the banker involved as well. So that's a real quick run through of some of the considerations that I think are really important. The whole idea that I follow as a business coach is to work to help people build a business that supports their life rather than spending their life in support of their business. And so what I find is if we start immediately to work on building the value in our business, you can build a business that not only supports your life today, but it can support the next owner and really continue to support your life long after you've left the business. So when you ride into the sunset, give those things consideration, and hopefully you'll have a successful ride and a great end or great next phase of your life from there on out. So Ryan, that's basically a quick run through of some of the things to consider. I'll turn it back to you.
Perfect, Jerry. Thank you so much. Great information. And for those of you on the webinar, I've read a number of books, including John Warlow's, which I think is very good. But I always highly recommend Jerry's book first. And if you want to, read John's book or some of the other ones, fantastic. But Jerry's book is by far the best one out there, and it's not I can't use the word encyclopedia or phone book anymore because nobody knows what those are, but textbook. It's not a textbook. It's a very well written, good in enough detail, but a good summary of what you need to do. Jerry, the one question that's come in, you actually on the first bullet point here kind of answered the question, but it's that question I get a lot in the webinars. What are some of the first steps I need to do to start? How do I start? What do I do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it certainly highlights the fact that we often don't know where to start, right? Because we just don't do this every day. We get one shot at this, and that makes it tough. So, I think it's important to bone up a little bit. I mean, the reason I wrote the book was to give people some resource that could help them to learn a little bit about this on their own. That's a good step. I think it's important just to talk to people who have gone through the process or advisors who can help with it. Ryan, people like yourself and others who can get people started. But really, in terms of really the first step to take, I think a business valuation is somewhat important to start to give you a sense of, what is it that I've built here? Do I have a valuable asset? Is there equity in this? Can I improve it? What kind of money do I want for retirement? And if my business is my retirement asset, is it going to be enough that's really a good place to start in general because it leads to all the other questions that fall out from there.
Good, perfect. Jerry, thank you. I don't have any other questions, but again, for those of you on the webinar, Jerry is very good at asking questions, so please do contact him if you have more questions for him. Jerry, again, thank you very much.
My pleasure, Ryan. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Our webinar next month features Don Niskowiak of B2B CFO, and he will discuss how to use benchmarking to increase your business value. You can register for our on-site workshops, virtual certificate programs, and all upcoming no-cost webinars at uwgb.edu/SBDC. We also have several past webinar recordings there on sales, marketing, business ownership, and leadership. So in closing, I would very much like to thank author Jerry Baltus of Baltus Group Advocoach. Jerry, thank you, and please go on Amazon or on his website and order his book and read that. Mickey and Chad at First Business Bank, and Michael Wentworth, thank him as well, of TMR Associates. And thank you all for attending. Now go do those things to harvest maximum value from your business. This concludes our webinar. Have a great day. Goodbye.